E. M. Forster's literary career spans the first quarter of 20th century. The 20th century is an age of complexities and contradictions. The spat of new ideas and inventions has bewildered mankind, and the tensions of the modern age has made life oppressive. A new world seems to have emerged. Foster's age is dominantly an age of science. An era of material prosperity and affluence has been ushered in. Spiritual values have been thrown into the background. Materialism has become rampant. Racial differences have surfaced. A sensitive man like E. M. Foster felt all this keenly. He was aware of the racial differences, the onrush of materialism, and the spiritual vacuum. His age had lost the most cherished values of life. In his novel Passage to India, Foster has presented the racial problem and the problem of human relationship very effectively. The outcome of the Industrial Revolution has been the concept of socialism and democracy. Whereas it liberated the masses to some extent, it also created a chaotic condition. Faster means of communication created problems of its own. Religion had become a spent force. The Boer War, 1899 1902, had been a turning point in the political life of England. The life led by Englishmen in Victorian England was complacent. The Boer War gave the Britishers a rude shock. In the courses of time, England was faced with grave problems at home as well as abroad. Indians, led by Gandhiji, agitated for freedom. Racial bitterness and hatred was on the increase. Besides, England was plagued by widespread unrest and disturbances in the industrial and political fields. The Great War of 1914 was hailed in the beginning as a deliverer and the harbinger of a golden age. But very soon the optimism faded away and people realized the futility of the war. The world was found to be groping in the dark for a sure and definite guidance. T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland appeared as early as 1922, and 2 years later appeared E. M. Foster's A Passage to India. The period in which these two works appeared may be summed up in the words of G. S. Fraser. One can think of the 1920s as a decade in which the English people as a whole were recovering from the shock of the First World War and hoping desperately that things would get back to normal, to the material comfort and moral security of the Edwardian age, to the old Victorian confidence in the steady march of human progress. To the soldier, the war had left something like a permanent scar on the mind. And E. M. Foster, who lived in such an age, wrote about problems of his age. He wrote specifically about the racial problem and the problems of human relationship in A Passage to India. From the beginning of the First World War, new experiments were being carried out in the field of literature. The new forces which resulted from the war broke the old traditions and made it necessary for new experiments to be conducted in several fields. In fiction, James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Aldous Huxley, and D. H. Lawrence played an important part. James Joyce was a novelist of unique and extraordinary genius. He looked upon language as a sixth sense. He did pioneering work in the stream of consciousness technique. His important novels are Ulysses and a portrait of the artist as a young man. Of these, Ulysses is the masterpiece. Virginia Woolf was the most distinguished woman of her generation. She made a far more exciting use of the stream of consciousness technique than James Joyce. She had been immensely impressed by James Joyce's Ulysses. The Voyage Out and To the Lighthouse are two of her important novels. Aldous Huxley was different from the above mentioned novelist. His prime concern was the search for a workable faith in the bewildering world of his day. In order to understand the generation that attained maturity between the First and the Second World Wars, Huxley's novels and prose writings are the best guide. Chrome Yellow and Brave New World are the two of his well known novels. Perhaps D.H. Lawrence was the novelist who reacted most sharply to his times. He was against the merchandised society of his time. He believed that man should not go against the grain of his nature. Sons and Lovers and Women in Love are some of the best works of D.H. Lawrence. Almost in all his novels, he was preoccupied with sex. E.M. Forster, unlike some of the other contemporary novelists mentioned above, never tried to impose on his readers a new creed or impress them by some technical novelty. Edward Morgan Foster, E.M. Foster, the divine of contemporary English novelist, was born in London on January 1st, 1879, and educated at Tonbridge School and King's College, Cambridge, where he became friendly with G. Lewis Dickinson. By the time he was 20, he had worked on a novel, although he never finished it. After graduation, he published stories, some of them appearing in the Independent Review. In 1905, he published his first novel, Where Angels Fear to Tread, written during his stay in Italy. The setting of the novel is in this country, and its theme is the impact of a foreign culture on provincial personalities. In the next year, Foster prepared a school edition of the Aeneid, 1906. Tonbridge School and Cambridge are the settings for Foster's second novel, The Longest Journey, a book dealing with the problem of illusion and reality and the conflict between the people who are upright and honest and those who are false and hypocritical. A Room with a View, published in 1908, may very well have been conceived 5 years earlier. It is a comedy, and like the first novel, its setting is in Italy. Foster had returned to England in 1907, and it was there that he finished A Room with a View. He also began at this time to lecture at the Working Men's College. In 1910, Howard's End appeared. It was considered by many to be Foster's masterpiece. The essential conflict in this novel is embodied in the Schlegel and Wilcox families, the former representing the inner life, the life of art and thought and generous impulses, and the latter representing the external life of affairs of telegrams and hurry and anger. Foster here raises the question whether we can reclaim the roots of tradition in the modern world where there is a flux even in the hearts of man. His answer is a qualified yes. If men and women are truly perceptive and they are moved by love, the roots of tradition can be secured. In 1911, Foster made his first trip to India, accompanying G. Lewis Dickinson. During the First World War, he helped in the civilian war effort in Alexandria and contributed a series of essays to the Egyptian Mail, which later appeared under the title Pharaohs and Phaleron. He also wrote at this time Alexandria, a history and guide. Back in London after the war, he engaged in literary journalism briefly and in 1921 returned to India, when he served as a secretary to the Maharaja of Divas. His Indian experience provided the background for A Passage to India, his most celebrated novel, and the winner in 1925 of Femina Vae Hosuri and the James Tate Black Memorial Prizes. The novel is a sensitive rendering of the clash of English and Indian temperaments and cultures. Misreading, prejudice, and suspicion poison dissent, human relationship, and work to keep even men of good will apart. Only the elderly Mrs. Moray, a mistake, seems able to overcome the barriers. In 1927, E. M. Forster was invited to deliver the Clarke Lecture at King's College, Cambridge. These were published in the same year as aspects of the novel, his most substantial and influential volume of criticism. In 1934, he published a life of his friend Dickinson, and in 1936, Avenger Harvest appeared a collection of reviews. The Hills of Devi deals with Indian experiences. Marini Thornton is a biography of his great aunt. Forster was honored by Queen Elizabeth II, who conferred upon him the Order of Companions of Honor in 1953. Some of his principal novels are Where Angels Fear to Tread, 1905, The Longest Journey, 1907, A Room with a View, 1908, Howard's Inn, 1910, A Passage to India, 1924. Short stories that he wrote are The Celestial Omniverse and Other Stories, the 1911, The Eternal Monument and Other Stories, 1928. Essays he wrote Avenger Harvest, A Misslery, 1936, Two Cheers for Democracy, 1951. Criticism, Aspects of the Novel, 1927, and Virginia Woolf, 1942. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. If you really liked it, do subscribe and comment down below. Bye.